And with that, here we are, session number 2 for the MJHL Roundtable, and we are so thrilled to learn, connect, and educate with our 2 guests in our discussion, which is not just one of the most important in the hockey world right now, but also just in the world with the scope of things, and that is Stanley Cup champion, 2-time best-selling author, Playing with Fire, and Conversations with a Rattlesnake, Theo Fleury, and former NHLer and Olympic silver medalist as he backstopped Canada back in, 1994, Hershey. Corey Hirsch is with us as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I should say I'm Leah Hextall. I'm your host for right now. I guess I should tell the folks that as well, for a discussion that I know both of you take very seriously because it is something that is near and dear to your heart. So thank you both for being here today.
No, thanks for having me.
Anytime, absolutely.
So with the 2 of you, I've had the privilege of getting a chance to know you both at different occasions. And I know that we could sit here and we could talk hockey and tell stories all night long. But the fact is we're here to have a very important conversation about mental health. And while both of you are established, many of you know, we know your stories, but the fact is, Theo, you have been so open and honest and transparent with your addiction, sexual abuse, and your story. But if I came to you, and it's the first time that I ever got to sit down with you, and I said to you, tell me about your journey, what would I need to know?
Huh. We only have 35 minutes.
Yeah, where do you start?
Okay. So the Coles Notes version of my story is I grew up in a home where both my parents experienced childhood trauma, and that manifested itself into addictions as a coping mechanism for them to deal with their past trauma. And so I grew up in a house that was chaotic, violent, arguing, fighting. We were very poor. There wasn't a whole lot to go around. And so that was my sort of first experience with trauma. And early on in my life, I developed anxiety, which I didn't know it was anxiety. I only felt comfortable in chaos. And so anybody that's ever watched me play a hockey game, what happened the first thing I stepped on the ice, what happened? Chaos. And I created it because I felt comfortable in that chaos. And then as an adolescent hockey player, a phenom hockey player, I ran into a coach and a scout who basically promised me a one-way ticket to the NHL if I followed him verbatim. And what happened was he raped me 150 times over a 2.5-year period. And what I was left with was a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, and there wasn't one person in the world that I could have told, because if I would have told, that would have been the end of my hockey career. And so I kept this secret inside for many, many years, and it wasn't too long after the abuse started that I started using alcohol as a coping mechanism for the emotional pain and scars that were left behind from my experience with my parents, and also what happened with the coach. Long story short, I got kicked out of the NHL in 2003 because I couldn't stop drinking, couldn't stop doing drugs, and my behavior was completely out of control. But really at the end of the day, it was I could no longer manage my mental health issues. And that's the reason why I left the game, because I was experiencing severe depression. I was having panic and anxiety attacks before, after, and during games. And yeah, it was completely disheveled, raw. And, you know, back in 2000, nobody was talking about mental illness. And so basically 16 years ago, I had a fully loaded pistol in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger to end my life. Not because I wanted to die, but because I was completely exhausted from living in emotional pain and suffering for the majority of my life. And in 2009, I wrote a book called Playing with Fire, where I talked about everything that I just talked about. And had the most incredible, amazing comeback in life, because what happened was, by me finding my own voice and putting a voice to my pain and suffering, it allowed other people to take the story as their own and find that same courage and that same strength to find their voice and talk about what happened to them. And like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years, and it is absolutely the most rewarding work that I've ever done in my life. And I always say I would trade my Stanley Cup and my Olympic gold medal for the opportunity every day to save somebody's life.
You just need to take a moment almost when you hear that, Theo. And I've read your books and I know your story, but it breaks your heart in so many ways to hear things, but also to see how you turned it well. But the thing that you just said there was finding your voice. And Hershey, for you, I know that came for you at a platform, the Players Tribune, the first time I found out about your story when you wrote your article, Dark, Dark, Dark. And unlike Theo, your story is very different.
Yeah. So, and the Theo, just you know, I'm so sorry you went through that. And there's so many things that he says that are similar, but my story is different in the sense that I'll give you the other side of mental health. I had a great childhood. You know, we didn't have much money, but I didn't suffer much as far as trauma. I mean, I had my issues and all that, but I did grow up with a lot of anxiety, and I do know that chaos that Theo felt that anxiety brings, right? It's running from one place to another to try to get rid of the anxiety. But as a kid, you know, my life was rolling right along. Had great junior hockey career in Kamloops and everything. Won a Memorial Cup. Just had won an Olympic silver with Team Canada in 1994 at the Olympics. And then 2 weeks later, I was with the New York Rangers, when the way I describe it is something in my brain just kind of broke. And I don't, to this day, I can't tell you what or how or why. Doctors can't tell you how or what or why. They just know that, you know, something just kind of disconnected in my brain. And I look back previously, the anxiety was there, but, you know, I started getting deep, dark, repetitive thoughts that I didn't want there. You know, horrible thoughts that, you know, I was a horrible person. I was going to do this. I was going to do that. You know, that and fast forward 3 years later, you know, I'd be diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. But the shame, the guilt that came with those thoughts, the best way I can describe obsessive compulsive disorder is I talk to people, I say, okay, so you're driving one way down a road, cars are coming at you the other way. We've all had that thought, well, what if I just swerve my car into the other lane, right? And it's like, why did I think that? You know, does that mean I want to hurt somebody else? Does that mean that I want to crash my car? Does that mean I want a normal functioning brain would just go on with their day and say, oh, that's a stupid thought. Like, what was that? An OCD brain like I have, I would go home, I would ruminate on that thought. I would wonder why. I would wonder why I was such a horrible person for thinking that. Did I want to kill somebody? Did I want to hurt somebody? You know, and it was just, like I said, something in my brain just broke. And so what I would do is then I would just decide not to drive my car. Like that would be it. I just wouldn't. And you'd hole up in your room. You just lock yourself away from society. And that's the other side of mental health. So 3 years later, again, so I'm with the New York Rangers on a run to the Stanley Cup. I'm a black ace, but New York Rangers hadn't won a Stanley Cup in so many years. But I'm a roster member. So I drink out of the Stanley Cup when they win. I go home, I try and get therapy. I don't know what's going on in my brain, just chaos, confusion. And like Theo, tired of just running, just tired. And I end up making an attempt at my own life. Thankfully unsuccessful, like Theo. And then again, 3 years later, I would just try to hide shame, disgust, everything that's going on in my brain, skating on the ice, going around in warm up and people are cheering and they want your autograph. And you're like, if only these people knew what I was really going through and what was really going on in my brain, they would think I was this horrible person or whatever. But finally the rails came off, right? I was my second year in the National Hockey League. I dropped down to about 135 pounds. I was having panic attacks. I couldn't keep it together anymore. So I finally told the trainer, and the trainer ended up hooking me up with a therapist that came to my apartment. And I was too ashamed to go to a therapy office because heaven forbid someone sees an NHL player go into a therapist office. My goodness, what would people think? What would they say? So he came to my apartment, and within 15 minutes, he's like, you have obsessive compulsive disorder. And I'm like, are you kidding me? 3 years I suffered with panic attacks, made an attempt on my own life. And I just needed to reach out and see somebody and get diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. And then from there, I mean, it's a battle. Like, I had to unwind all those years that I hid. But 10 years later, I finally found a therapist that could help me. 10 years after that, my story came out. So we're talking from diagnosis to my story, 20 years, Leah. Like, people are like, oh, you're so brave, your story. It took me 20 years to tell my story, to feel safe to tell my story. And then once I did, and Theo said it perfectly when he said, I would give everything away for the chance to help people, because it's more rewarding than any win I ever had in any level or anything. And Theo, and I'll pass it to you, and I'll just say, any goal you ever scored. All right. I mean, this stuff is just, when you help somebody, it becomes about helping others. And hockey for me it was about me. It was all about me. Right. And when you change into that mold of helping others, it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Well, and I think the biggest thing in how you stay healthy is you put yourself out there and you help other people, because I don't want to live inside of this head, right? Because when I live inside of this head, it's not great. It's not fun. It's not exciting. And so I take every opportunity that I can to live outside of my head, because my brain is lying to me all the time, right? And when I help other people, I'm not in my own head. I'm fully present and attuned to the person that I'm helping. And I can't achieve that by myself, or it's very difficult to achieve peace when I am completely and utterly alone with my thoughts. And so the more that I help people, the less that I am in my own head. And the less that I am in my own head, I'm way more happy. I'm way more productive, and it's just a completely different thing, because my brain doesn't work like everybody else's brain, because I have a mental illness. And so I have to do things every single day, or sometimes second to second, moment to moment, so that I don't have these thoughts of being anxious all the time, or being depressed, or whatever it is. And so, that we have this saying, helping is healing. And the more people I've helped, the more I've been able to heal myself. And I'm in therapy for the rest of my life. And that's a misconception that everybody thinks that 2 or 3 or 4 sessions with a therapist is going to cure you. No, this is a lifelong journey of figuring out me, because I ran away from myself as much as I could when I was in my active addiction and my active mental health. Like, I just ran away. And so I had to bring it all back to self and have a relationship with myself for the very first time. And since I did that, what did I say today? I have 5,398 consecutive days of sobriety. Like, how does that happen?
Incredible.
Like, I couldn't go 5 minutes without using something, And so the more that I help people, the further I'm away from a drink or a drug or whatever it is. And so, I've dedicated my life to helping people, because, the biggest issue is that we have not created a safe space in society yet, where the Corey Hirsches and the Theo Fleurys and the Sheldon Kennedys can come out and tell their story without being ridiculed, pointed the finger at, et cetera, et cetera. We're not there. We're not there. And that's why mental illness is the epidemic that it is that people are so afraid to talk about what Corey and I just talked to you about when you introduced us.
So Theo, that being said, and Corey as well, when we talk about that, I look at mental health and I think, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago in my career, we weren't talking about this in the hockey community. We weren't really talking about this in the world. Now it is a discussion. But the fact is that, like you just said, a lot of people still don't feel comfortable about coming out. So what do coaches, teammates, parents need to look for within their space that might indicate to them that someone is struggling? Or is there a way to know that?
Behavioral change. Just look for the change in behavior, and then go with your gut and say, hey, I see that you're struggling, or first of all, I want you to know that I care about you, and this is why I'm asking you this question now, instead of like going right after, are you mentally ill, or saying something like that. First of all, establish the fact that you care first and foremost, and that whatever you say to me stays between you and me until you decide what you want to do with the information that you're providing me right now.
Yeah, and very well said, obviously. When people look now, Theo, it was no secret to everybody around the league that you had struggles, but no one really came and I don't know, but it was like you would just say, oh, that's just Theo, right? That's just Theo. And like for me, the signs were there. I withdrew from my teammates. I lost, 25 pounds. I was late for meetings, late for practice. The excuses I would make, right? Like just the flat. I don't like to call them lies, because I was trying to survive.
That's it. Basically, you're surviving. Yeah.
But all those things are things to look for, right? That this isn't, and if the behavior changes, and if that does, you can go to the person and say, hey, everything okay, whatever you say, like, don't be afraid to go up and talk to somebody. And the conversation, you just need to let them know that you're a safe person to talk to, that they can talk to you. They might not talk to you that day. Yeah. Might be 2 weeks later, might be 6 months later, right? But eventually, if they know and you let them know that you're a safe person to talk to, eventually, hopefully they will come to you. You can't force anybody to come to you, but be available and non-judgmental. That's non-judgmentalism is a huge,
I can say.
Yeah,
No
and at the other side of that, guys, too, is I'm just thinking right now, if I was sitting here today and I was a coach or a parent or a teammate, and someone came up to me and said, I'm struggling, or I want to harm myself, or actually came up to me to have that conversation, I would have no idea what to do. I would have no idea who to reach out to or what I'm supposed to do, and to do the right thing that's not going to scare this person away or perhaps force them into being embarrassed and go do something to themselves. So what do you say to people about what if someone does have the courage to come out and tell you that they're struggling or they'd like to harm themselves? What do we do?
Well, I think it's very sort of instinctive, right? Because I think we all know the right thing to do, and we may be afraid to give of ourselves, right? Like, do you know that you can actually rewire a person's brain by just being present and being attuned, and listening to them will rewire their brain? So something as simple as that. I hear you. This must be really hard for you, and I'm here for you. And then make the choice and decision on their own. Let them make that decision. So now that you've told me all this, what do you want to do? Do you want to get help? Do you want to go see somebody? Do you want to talk to somebody? That just basic, showing that you care will change people exponentially in that simple, short time when they're, ready to tell you what they need to tell you.
Yeah,
like
and that's
9 times out of 10, like, people will come up to me at events and I don't have to say a word. All I do is hold the space, I'm present and I'm attuned, and they tell me their story. And then I grab them and give them a big hug and say, you know, like, what do you want to do now?
Yeah, that's, you know, and then the next step can be, okay, well, you know, let's make an appointment with your GP. You know, let's talk about that. Let's find you a therapist. You know, let's find you the right help. If it's a kid, we're probably going to need to talk to an adult that the kid feels safe to talk to as well. Somebody that they trust, not somebody just that you trust, but somebody that they trust too, that they'll open up to. Because, you know, you keep a secret like that, and, you know, with a kid, and it you know, it takes a village. It really does. Mental health takes a village of help, of people, of the right people. You know, for me, I'll even ask somebody if they're thinking of harming themselves. I'll be like, hey, you know what? You're thinking of harming yourself? And it's okay to ask that. And and you know, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say no. But if they say yes, then I know this is where I'm at with this person. This is what we need to do. We need to get on this immediately. And I'm actually happy when someone tells me that they're thinking of harming themselves, because they're looking for help and I've got an answer. It's the people that are silent that worry me, because the people that go silent, like I went silent, I didn't talk before you know, and those are the ones that worry me. If someone comes to me and says that they're thinking of harming themselves, I'm like, okay, you know, great. You're talking to me. You're looking for help. You want help. Let's get you help. And I know that person wants help. It's okay to ask somebody if they're thinking of harming themselves.
So Corey, I'm just wondering, and Theo as well, was there, and this might be a naive question because I just don't get it, but was there a moment for you where that switch flipped, where you said, I need help now, or else this is going to turn out real bad for me? And when was that moment, if it was there?
Yeah, I don't know if with Theo where he got to his point, but I was done. There's 2 choices. This time I was really going to be successful at doing it, or I could make one last attempt at getting help. And I made the right decision, talking to a trainer and getting help. But I was at a complete crisis point. And I'll let Theo talk in a second. But what I speak on, Leah, and what I advocate for is, why was I not taught this stuff in high school? Why was I not taught about anxiety, depression, OCD, bipolar? If I'd have known what happened to me, so I can tell you the moment, everywhere I said my brain just kind of broke, I can tell you where I was, the moment, everything. And it's different. Theo's is more trauma-based, but I could have gotten help the next day. Instead, you know, I suffered with this for 3 years, made an attempt on my own life, didn't know what was going on. And then I had to unravel all that. And I actually ended up throwing away my NHL career. My daughter has obsessive compulsive disorder when she was 15, because we have an open dialogue in our house. From her being younger, she comes to me and says, Dad, there's something going wrong with my brain. She's 15. I go, okay, great. We're going to see a therapist. She gets diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, because mental illness is a lot of times genetic, part of it. And she will never get to that point that I got to, because we had those conversations in our house, and I was able to get her the help that she needed. So why is this stuff not taught to our kids? And that's what I advocate for.
Theo, got anything in addition to that?
Well, I knew I was going to die, and I didn't want to die. And I knew that what I was showing the world, I was better than what I was showing the world. And I hadn't asked for help. And, you know, I hit my knees in a washroom on September 17th, 2005, and I surrendered. And I turned my will and my life over to the care of the universe as I understand it. And the next day I woke up, and I haven't had a drink or a drug since that day. And I think it was that true and utter surrender of saying, you know what, I can't do this on my own anymore. And because I tried for many years to figure this out on my own. I'm a smart guy, and I thought I could outsmart the disease of trauma, mental health, and addiction. And, you know, brought me to my knees. And The day I asked for help was the day that I saved my life, really, and part of the stigma is if I ask for help, it means I'm weak. No, it means you're a person of tremendous courage and strength, and you actually care about yourself, right? That's what asking for help means. And somehow that message has got flipped around, and that's part of the stigma. And Corey and I are out there every day fighting stigma. That's our biggest opponent in this whole space is stigma.
So let's go there, guys, right now, and let's put it into the world of hockey, which is a world that I know both of you lived in, and whether or not you were suffering from things, people would look and say you thrived in as athletes because of what you achieved. But if you play in hockey, we know it's not a perfect world. We know that sports is not a perfect world. How do we break down that wall so that that stigma does not exist? And is it as simple as it's starting at the grassroots level and having this, as Corey just mentioned, starting with the kids?
Well, it's like I said, we got to create the safe space, right? If you suffer from a mental illness, guess what? You're in the majority, not the minority of people, right? Like, we've just experienced the most traumatic thing that's ever happened since World War II. And so when that happens, fear becomes a huge part of it. Everybody's anxious, and so I'm preparing myself right now for the onslaught of, the epidemic of mental health to be even bigger than it was before this. But it's because we've slowly opened up and are starting to open up a safe space in society. So how do we create safe spaces? By vulnerability. By me saying that I was raped 150 times by my coach. Because that's a reality. 1 out of every 4 people that walk the face of the earth have experienced some sort of unwanted sexual experience as a child or an adolescent. Those are the stats. That's the truth. And then if you go into the mental illness side of it, it's even bigger than that. And so why are we hiding this? This is an issue. Let's create spaces where we can talk about this stuff, right? Like for the first month and a half of COVID, I didn't get out of bed. I fell into a deep, dark depression. I barely could get up and go to the washroom because I was so afraid that I was going to get the COVID, I was going to die, and all this stuff. And you know what happened though? The greatest lesson of that experience was I finally accepted that I have mental illness and that this is for the rest of my life, that I'm not going to beat this. And I can tell you it was life-changing for me. And I looked at the universe and I went, oh, thank you for that gift, right? Thank you for giving me another sign, another signal, so that I could once and for all accept that I have mental illness. Because I wasn't accepting before because, you know me, I think I could beat everybody. I could beat everything, right? Well, this thing brought me to my knees once again. And it was because I wouldn't accept the fact that I have mental illness. And now the fact that I've accepted it and that I have a toolbox of tools that I use that aren't going to harm me. I don't drink anymore. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs, all these things. But now my toolbox has meditation and yoga, exercise, golf, working with other people, right? It's amazing. So, I think acceptance is probably, the thing that I needed to learn the most. And I'm sure that Corey would agree with that.
You know what? And Theo, I grew up watching you. You're a little bit older than me, but I watched you play for the Flames. I watched you win a Stanley Cup. And, I look at you now with your story coming out as more of a man than ever, right? Showing that vulnerability. yourself and Clint Malarchuk and Sheldon and Michael Landsberg, and right. I mean, I always felt like I was less of a man than everybody else because I had a mental illness, and that's what I thought. I thought people would look at me like I'm weak, I'm less of a man than everybody else. And what I've found is that showing vulnerability and getting therapy is being a man, and you're better for everybody around you. You're better for your own life. You're better for everybody. And Leah, you asked, where does it start? It starts in the home. It starts right at home, right from the time the kids are 2 to 3 years old, from the time they can talk and walk and listen, and letting them know that, it's okay to not be okay. Like, I feel like everybody should have a therapist, like everybody has a doctor. I don't go see my therapist, every week, or my doctor every week, but when they're there, I have one.
Well, you just talked about opening up the conversation and the dialogue and being able to perform as people. And, if your mental health isn't right, then how do you perform at the greatest level? And I know that in the world of sports, we're always talking about the training programs and the physical nature of it and keeping your body in shape. But I think we all know that so much of it, if not the majority of it, goes on between the ears. And so it's not just about, we're talking about heavy stories right now, guys. But even for like the general athlete, taking care of your mental health on a day-to-day basis, that is not going to make a better performance and more productivity. Theo, you look at it and you think, as much as you already have a case, my friend, for making the Hall of Fame, do you ever think to yourself, if I would have had the right mental health, what else I could have done?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then I would have been, I would already be in the Hockey Hall of Fame, right? But I honestly would not change one thing about my life. Honest to God. I look at my parents as absolute gifts in my life. I look at Graham James as a gift in my life, because without having those experiences, I'm not here talking to you about mental illness and how to overcome it and all of that, my relationship with Graham James for 45 minutes was awful, horrific, terrible, disgusting, you name it. But the rest of the time, I needed that piece of that relationship in my life. And so if I don't unpack it all, and if I don't look at each and every thing about it, then I'll never understand why did it happen. And everything happens for a reason, right? And obviously, the universe picked me to have these experiences, so that put me in this position now where, I can help people overcome. And sure enough, I'm involved in the biggest epidemic in the planet. Go figure. Stanley Cup champion, Olympic gold medalist, biggest epidemic in the world. It all fits. It all makes sense, right? And so for a post-career life, I have the best job in the whole entire universe. Overcoming and trying to figure out the biggest epidemic on the planet. Yeah, my brain works that way, because I know what that looks like. I know what that feels like. I know what success is. I know what it looks like. I know how to motivate people, all those things. And so, everything in my life is a blessing. And would I change anything? No. And if I don't get in the Hockey Hall of Fame, I don't get in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Big deal. But I know I'm in the People Hall of Fame. And I think that matters the absolute most in the world, is that people see me as a safe place to come and talk about anything. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to take what you said to me and use it against you. I'm just here to help, right? Yeah. And to me, that's what life's all about at the end of the day, is we were all put on this earth to help each other get through the most difficult times in our life. It's as simple as that.
It sounds, Theo, like you've really come to a place of gratitude for everything. And that's an amazing place to be, right? Being thankful for what you have. And Theo, I still work on that every day. Like I'm trying to get there. I still struggle with it, right? I still get up some days and And it's, that's something that I need to work on daily is gratitude. So I appreciate you saying that, even for me, because, you know, grateful for the things you have, the surroundings you have, for the life you've had. You know, and Leah, I look back on my career, and I'm just like, you know, the thing that mental health with me that I struggle, I couldn't train properly. Never slept properly, never ate properly, never slept. Right. So, you know, those things, yes, the physical side probably would have helped me become a better player. But Theo, it's amazing when, you know, those are again, like you say, without having any regrets or anything. However, I wish I could have had an attitude of more gratitude back then, right? Like, and just be so thankful for being able to play the game and just being with your teammates and just being on the ice and just, you know, grateful for your surroundings. And it's hard when you're in the middle of it and when you're young, because it's so much about us as players. It was about my pregame. It was about, you know, my nap. It was about, you know, the goal I got scored on in the second period that caused us to lose the game, or the save I made in the third period. It was me, I. That's all it was. And then now I've crossed over into a life of, it's all about other people, right? And I wish I could have got there sooner, but I'm so happy that I'm there now, being able to help others, because Theo said it perfectly. There's healing in helping others.
And now,
and you talked about, you know, the importance of mental health as an athlete or as a human being, right? And so, you know, we train our bodies, right? And the way that I see it is, you know, everybody can play. Everybody can play. And the thing that's going to set you apart from being a good player and being a great player is your mental health, your state of mind. And so if you train your body, why don't you train your brain the same way? Right? If somebody would have told me 20 years ago that I could be even better if I did X, Y, Z for my mental state of being, who knows how good I could have been? Because I was already mentally tough and mentally focused and all those things. And so, you know, who knows? And I always, you know, when I talk to kids, that's what I tell them. I say, you want to be great? Work on the mental side. How you prepare, you know, breathing, meditation, yoga, like these things may sound like they're foo-foo, but I'm telling you, they work. And not only do they work, but like stuff, like little things that normally bother you, if you start using these practices in your everyday life, man, nothing really matters because you're actually so in tune with you and yourself that it doesn't matter what's going on around you, because you just zone in and focus on what's really important.
Yeah. This is we're having a conversation here, and you know, Corey and I have worked together, and you know, at Sportsnet, and Corey's still an analyst for the Vancouver Canucks on Sportsnet. And I just want to say, you know, in being transparent, I haven't had, you know, great trauma in my life, but just last November, I started to go to counseling for the very first time in my life after the loss of my father last year, because I didn't like where I was going and how I was handling the grief process. That being said, while I was there for him, in my counseling session, when we talk about performance, I had this incredible opportunity to call an NHL game just in March, and that came around. And through my counseling, through the open conversations, how do I want to arrive in this place? What do I need to get there? Sleep, health, rest, putting all those out and talking about it. I showed up in that space, and I usually have great anxiety. I get so nervous, and this was a monumental, historic moment, and I didn't feel that. I laid down and breathed before. I did all of these things that I would have never have done if I hadn't started taking care of my mental health. So while I know we're talking about heavy things, I think that for everyone, that this is just such an important thing that we have to, when we talk about stigma, flipping the script to that everyone needs to take this as the start of where to begin to be healthy. Yeah. And so I just, you know, I think that everyone, you know, and speaking about it and saying that, you know, hey, I go to counseling once every 2 weeks. That's what I do. And
That's, you know what? Thank you for sharing that, Leah.
Yeah,
I
thank you.
appreciate that. Right? It's like, but we, all of us at some point, that's the thing. It's like Theo said, we've all got something, and all of us at some point are going to have some form of depression, some form of anxiety, yet we stigmatize it. Like our brains are the most complex thing we have. They're going to break. It's what it is. It's okay if our arm breaks, but it's not okay if someone's brain breaks, because everybody's brain has to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, heaven forbid, you know, it's like, it's so ridiculous. Like, it's part of our physical body. It's going to break.
And what we know about the brain that we never knew before was the brain is incredibly resilient, and it's neuroplastic. And so, you know, I wrote a second book called Conversations with a Rattlesnake. I wrote it with a neuroscientist. And she sat down at my kitchen table and she said, I can rewire your brain. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? You're going to rewire this brain?
What?
And she said, yeah, I can rewire this brain. And you know what? I took all my poker chips and I pushed them in the table, in the middle of the table, and I said, show me how to do that. And she did. She showed me how to rewire all that trauma and all that stress and all those layers that I've been carrying around for many years. And it's just like, it's incredible. And here's the best part. So I had a coach from the time I was 5 until I was 40. Okay. So as soon as I turned 40, I don't need coaches anymore in my life. Absolutely. And what is a therapist? A life coach, you know? That's basically what it is. And so, you know, I have lots of really great coaches around me now that I bounce things off of.
I don't just go to therapy for OCD. Like, I'll go for relationship help. I'll go for, you know, help with my kids, life help. Like, it doesn't have to be because you have a mental illness to go see a therapist, right? I mean, and finding a therapist is a personal thing, though. I will say that you might go through 5 or 6. You're like, I don't like that one. Nah, we just didn't click. But when you find one that you click with, that, you know, it's the greatest gift in the world, and it's an amazing thing to be able to help yourself, and the people around you appreciate it, right? I mean, it's like,
do they ever?
Absolutely.
You know, guys, we're running here, but there's also a part that I just want to get to. Once again, everyone's watching session number 2, the MJHL Roundtable with Theo Fleury Corey Hirsch. The sessions are free, but there is a chance to donate at the website mjhlhockey.ca. All the sponsorship money and all the donations are going to COVID relief for the league, and also their 11 teams after the season was paused and there were no playoffs, and that's the best time of year, as we all know. So please remember that, everyone. But I want to get to one thing, because when we talk about kids, this is something that I didn't grow up with, which was social media. And right now, I think that in the world of social media, I know what I have had said to me on social media as a grown adult and how hard it can be. And I'm just wondering if you guys have been having any conversations about, in your talks, more and more with the mental health community, about what's the proper way to handle social media and adults.
Yeah. Go ahead, Theo.
Well, most social media sites have a wonderful little button called block. And I use that.
Yes.
As soon as somebody says anything that's outrageously untrue, I know that they're trying to goad me into a conversation that I don't really want to be a part of. And so if I block them, then I never have to really, you know, but here's what it is for me. My first feeling when somebody says something negative or derogatory towards me, my first response is, I'm not good enough. That's my first response. Okay, I'm not good enough. That's why I'm having a reaction to what that person is saying. And what they're saying isn't the truth. But because I have, I'm not good enough as part of my trigger, it's going to cause me to chemically go all crazy and wiry. And so if I block them, that ends that anxiety, that ends that whole going down that road thinking that I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable, or,
No.
which is, my response is always that. And then my second response always is anger and rage. Okay. And so, because I made a choice a long time ago that I was going to work on my I'm not good enough and my anger and rage, it is always an incredible challenge not to engage in the back and forth that's going to happen, right? Because, yeah, I'm smart enough, I'm intelligent enough, I was a great trash talker on the ice, and I can use my intellect and absolutely, tear him a new one. But why? Why? And so, I always internalize it first before I react, and I know that it's my I'm not good enough.
Yeah. Well, and Leah, I'll give you a statistic. Okay, so the CDC did a study, and I believe it was between 2005 and 2017. Suicides between the ages of 10 and 24 went up 56%. Right? That's right around the time. There's been studies, but there's no direct correlation between social media. But I mean, come on, right? It's a big part of it. It's a big part of how fast our society is today and all that. And we need to put a dent in that. We need to end that. But as far as social media goes, Theo's exactly right. I would send out a tweet that I thought was pretty positive, pretty good. You'll get 1,000 likes. I'll get 200 comments. 195 of them are great. I would focus on the 5 people that said the crappy things about me, and I'd be like, well, and I'd end up interacting with them and not the people that that should be given my time. And Theo said it perfectly, because I used to do the same thing. The first stage is like you get angry, and then now I'm like, well, why? I don't even know that other person. Why am I engaging with them? I don't even know who they are. It could be anybody. It could be someone in their basement on their whatever, like just trying to do, like, it can be a great place for positive things. And so the way I look at it now is I only try to tweet out and retweet things that are important to me and that are positive, go in a positive direction. And I try to block out the negative things. And Theo's right, the block button is the greatest gift you can ever have. I'm worried that our society focuses on likes, right? How many likes did I get on this picture? How many likes did I get on that? I'll be honest, I'll go through my Instagram, I'll like 10 pictures and I don't even really look at them. I'll just be like, oh, hey, there's Johnny. Oh, hey, hey buddy, how are you? Right. I'm not even engaging. I'm not even thinking about that. But that person may take those likes as, self-esteem building. And I'm worried about that. Our society is going that way because we're so much more than a picture on Instagram. We're so much more than something on Twitter. And I've slowed right down on my Twitter account because I don't need that negativity in my life. It doesn't make me feel good, for one. So why do I do it? Why do I keep at it? Instead, you know what? I'm going to tweet out things like stuff what Theo's doing or what we're doing here or what Michael Landsberg's doing or what you're doing. Something positive, right? And try to keep it that way and stay above the weeds. Stay above the weeds. Yeah.
From a neuroscience perspective, every time we get a like, guess what happens? We get a hit of dopamine.
Yeah.
We get a hit of serotonin. So the social media companies knew that long time ago that likes were dopamine and serotonin, which is the pleasure part of our brain. But can you imagine putting a picture out there and you don't get any likes? What kind of chemistry you get from that?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
When you like that, exactly.
So
Gentlemen, we are almost up on our time here. I want to take a moment and tell everyone who is joining us tonight that this was session number 2, but we're also going to be going on for 2 more days of the MJHL Roundtable. Session 3 and 4 are tomorrow, Tuesday, 6:30 Central. From the New York Islanders, Stanley Cup winning coach Barry Trotz is joining us, former Dauphin Kings coach, along with his current defenseman, Grandview Manitoba product Ryan Pullock. I've never sat down with a coach and player at the same time, so I bet you guys can understand the fun I'm going to have with them. And then also at 8 o'clock, continuing on with health. And this was our mental health conversation, our physical literacy conversation with world-renowned Dr. Krelars at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Once again, you can donate at mjhlhockey.ca to help provide some support, COVID relief for the MJHL and their teams. And if you do so, you get a chance to win a Kyle Connor Heritage Winnipeg Jets jersey. So go donate a couple bucks. It's great because I can't tell you how important this conversation was. Theo, Corey, before we go, I'll start with you, Corey. Tell everyone where they can find you and how they can connect with you to continue.
Yeah, my website, CoreyHirsch.com. I'm on Instagram, CoreyHirsch72. I am on Twitter, Corey Hirsch, at Corey Hirsch. And, you know, I do public speaking, everything. And the last thing I'll leave, if something is going on in your brain, tell somebody, talk to somebody. I can't see it. I need you to tell me. And if you can tell me, I can help you.
Theo, how about yourself? How can we connect with you?
Excuse me. My website is theofleury.life. I'm on Twitter at TheoFleury14, Instagram at TheoFleury14 as well. I'm on Facebook as well. And you know what Corey said. You know, I don't think we were put on this earth to suffer in silence. We were put on this earth to be in relationship with one another and get each other through the most difficult times in our life. And so, you know, it's okay to ask for help. Like it's an essential part of the process. And, you know, like I said earlier, the day I asked for help was the day that I saved my own life. And what's come from that revelation is like, now I'm the helper guy. And another sort of epiphany that I had is if you have experienced trauma, mental health, and addiction in your life, guess what? We're the healers on this planet. And so you can see having trauma, having mental health, and having mental addiction or addiction issues as a burden. But actually, when you figure it out, you know, you're a healer. You're a healer. And if I wouldn't have had the experience that I had, I wouldn't be a healer. If Corey didn't have the experience that he had, he wouldn't be a healer. And there are lots of healers out there, and there are lots of people that are willing to help. But like Corey said, use your voice, because I can't read your mind.
Yes. And also, you know, everyone out there is fighting a battle, whether we know it or not. So be kind to each other. And
Yes.
That's something that we can all take with us. Theo, Corey, it's a pleasure to know both of you. I thank you so much, as the MJHL does, as do all of our viewers today, for this conversation and the conversations that you've been brave to have over your time. And I wish you nothing but the best in your continued mental health journey. And I will sign off tonight and just say thank you, gentlemen, so much. And thank you for joining us on the MJHL Roundtable.
Thank you, Leah.
All right, gentlemen, good night.
Namaste.
Thank you so much. Good night, you guys.
Bye.